information in the survey that we did in the month of March with parents throughout the United States. For those who don't know, Calculus Roundtable, we're a nonprofit organization that creates alternative pathways to higher math and science skills for students, particularly students of color. We've been around for 7 years, and we think of ourselves as a vertical education organization in the sense that we work in what we call high touch, which means we work directly with students in after-school programs, in-class supplemental instruction units, and online boot camps. Our medium touch is where we work with teachers through instructional coaching of them in the classroom or in professional development workshops that we do throughout the year. And low touch, which pays a lot of our bills, which is policy and research, often with county offices or school districts or with educational research firms like Education Trust West, who these findings will be included in a larger study that they are doing around distance learning. According to the United Nations, there are more than 770 million learners now worldwide who are being affected by the coronavirus in terms of not having access to schools or universities, which of course causes great disruption, as we all know, in our own lives and in the lives of schools and districts throughout the world. We're going to have a little smaller focus and just focus on the United States and California in particular. We sent out surveys to 1,500 parents, and these were parents that were involved in our programs. So whether we have programs, again, over the last, 7 years, we've worked with 11,000 students. So we have a list of parents who are involved in those programs or who have children who are doing programs online or who have attended some of our events throughout the years. So the majority of our respondents, over 830 respondents, came from California, in particular the Bay Area. But we did receive survey respondents from Washington State, from Chicago, from Virginia and Maryland. We did also receive some results from Florida, but they came in a little late for this survey. And our plan is to do the survey every other month until there's a cure. Who knows? Who knows how long this is really going to last? But we are really looking at parent sentiments towards the system. So we assume that is going to change over time. And as we get a longer longitudinal picture, we'll be able to really paint a good picture. We did get data that we did not include yet into this survey that we feel that wasn't substantial enough or didn't tell a strong enough story. So when next time we do this run in May, we hope to have more data that we can show and stand behind. Now, like I said, because we serve students in the Bay Area and we focus on students of color, the majority of the students we serve are in schools that have more Latino students, more African American students, a higher percentage of poor students, English learner students, and students with disability than the state as a whole, which in a diverse state, that's saying something. So we put weights into the survey so that it more fairly represented California student populations. So we did some adjustments with some of the numbers, some of the percentages based on the overpopulation of certain groups that didn't represent what was going on in the state as a whole. But we do have that data available. And it does tell a story because 60% of our students are Hispanic or Latino or English learners. So of the respondents, which is not surprising, the majority of them were female. We were actually very happy and impressed that we were able to get 39% of our survey respondents being male. We do some big events that we have a large population of fathers and caretakers who responded to this, so that was good to see. Uh, of the respondents, we asked how many children, and of course, over 60%, 64% had two or more children at home, which is very important when looking at lots of communities that we work with, lots of school districts that have one-to-one computer uh, uh, connectivity to kids and have sent computers home with kids and sort of patted themselves on the back because of that fact. But once those multiple computers get into homes and you have a third grader and a seventh grader working on content, working on activities, as a parent, that can become unruly, especially if technology access is an issue. So the number of children at home should really have a big determination about what kind of distance learning is happening. We definitely need to think about that as we build our programs. Again, we had a very diverse group of adults, parents who responded to this survey. Not only parents, but caregivers and grandparents also we received responses. The largest group of women who responded were Asian American, and the largest group of men who responded were Latino men. Survey. Again, this is an overpopulation. These are the actual raw numbers that came out of our survey. We asked a lot of questions about the technology used in the home and the curriculum that the lessons and curriculum that the teachers were giving out. And we asked in different ways to really nail down some data that we wanted to see. This was a really interesting question here. How confident do parents feel in supporting their child in the technology needed at home? We'll go through this in a couple of the other slides. But overall, parents, by a wide majority, were confident or somewhat confident that they could support their child with the technology at home. Again, these are very early stages. This was done in the month of March as school districts and schools were closing, suspending classes, moving towards an online environment. This will be an important slide to look at over time to see what level of confidence parents have in the technology. So as we talked to some parents as well, we got the impression that parents, most all parents have levels of technology at home. They feel comfortable with turning on that technology. They've had experience with monitoring the technology for their kids at home. So as sort of parental guide post, I'm admitting some other people into the room here as we continue. Um, uh, as parents are arbiters of the technology, they felt confident that they would be able to drive the technology needs of their students, of their children. They don't really think of them as students, I suppose. uh, Now we got a smaller group of confident parents that they could support the curriculum that was given out. We will see, this is again looking at parents overall. A majority, 55% of parents felt confident or somewhat confident that they could support their child in the curriculum. I thought I heard somebody have a question or anything going forward here? I'll keep going. These are overall numbers of curriculum. Again, when we break it down by parents of color, we do see some differentiation in this. And whereas parents expressed support for teachers in delivering instruction to their child, they they did not think necessarily that the district was giving the teachers the support that they needed, both in materials and training. Teachers are trying new things. Uh, Many cases, we're in a situation where we're letting 1,000 flowers bloom, and teachers are trying a mode of different things. But with that, they struggle to have support from either the school or the district. And in some cases, when we talk to parents about that, it had to do with the communication, where in the old world, like 3 months ago, uh, parents were used to getting correspondence about what was happening in the school, from the principal. Here's schedule, here's some events that are happening. But it sounds like since this situation, the notifications that have been going to parents are more operational, which of course makes sense. But it does say something about what kind of communication the schools and districts need to have with the individual parents. We're pushing a lot of that responsibility to individual teachers, but it's going to be important that the schools and the districts find a way to have direct contact with the parents, so that they feel that the teachers are not on their own and they're not flying by the seat of their pants, even though we all are flying by the seat of our pants. But I think parents express that they would like some more support coming from the schools and the districts themselves. We asked parents what hardware devices they had available at home, and we asked specifically what had they purchased in the last 5 years, which is a sort of an industry measure of lifespan of technology. Laptops last about 5.5 years, and so forth. So we asked them which of the devices and things to support technology at home they had purchased in the last 5 years. Um, things that jumped out at us were things like scanners. Uh, we've talked to schools that are scanning things or handing out paper assignments and asking parents to scan that information back to them, and very few uh, families represented that they had scanners at home. Now, when we look deeper in this, maybe we're going to change this question, because there are applications now that do scanning. So we're not sure if we have the right question there about scanners, or that parents are really not using scanners or not using applications for scanners. But we'll ask more questions as we continue this longitudinal dip in terms of applications that are relevant for parents on their smartphones. But we did see a difference between parents of color and white parents in terms of the technology that they had purchased in their homes. We asked about 3D printers. We found absolutely not one parent of color out of 837 respondents who had a 3D printer at home, which is somewhat not surprising. That's sort of a new market, but we did find a small sliver of white parents who had 3D printers. Uh, the one thing here, of course, that jumps out at me is that all parents and parents of students who are in free and reduced lunch programs, so an indicator that we use in Education for Poverty, have web-enabled televisions or video game consoles. Now, I have not talked to one school district, one administrator, one teacher who are using web-enabled televisions or video games as a distribution method for content. But that's something to really think about in the future. A vast majority of people have purchased video Xbox or our smart TVs, that can be wonderful tools for teaching if we think about ways outside of the box to deliver content that way. YouTube, of course, is delivered through web-enabled televisions and video game consoles, and there are a lot of other device or platforms that come through that. Some video games have education components to them. There are video game makers, especially in the early years, who do wonderful education light games that could be repurposed for instruction. Now, we ask parents, this is in the paper handout if you haven't received a copy of it in the announcement the press release that we had for this, that everyone on this call looks like they went through the registration page. Through that email, there's also a link to the survey if you don't have a hard copy of the survey itself. Uh, this page is too hard to read, but I'll talk you through some things that we discovered in asking parents about their role and the role of the institution. Here in these questions is where we found the largest disconnect between the overall numbers and the numbers specifically for parents of color. We asked parents if they felt they had the ability to support their child's need in technology, which we talked about. That uh, that number changed drastically when we looked at students of or parents of color in that same question. We'll go to that slide next and take a look at it. The support of the curriculum, overall, it looked really good and very positive, but especially with English learners and Latino parents, we found a large variance between those things, almost opposite uh, response. And the question at the far right asked, are teachers putting too much responsibility on the parents? Here's another area where we found great divergence. Overall, parents were in support of the teachers and did not feel the teachers were putting too much pressure on the parents to respond to information. And I'm flipping that same slide here to look at the confidence of parents of color, and we see very, very different numbers. So it's flipped. So the overall parents are at the bottom of the screen now. And at the top, we're looking specifically at parents of color. And if you look at the second group of indicators, I feel confident supporting my child in the curriculum. Overall, we have 27% of parents who feel very strongly they would be able to support their child in, I'm sorry, 57% be very strong as opposed to only 27%. So we found a great divergence there. And that was very important that will be very important to keep an eye on. We asked parents, we did not ask parents, were they receiving content in their native language, which is another area that we want to check in on. Anecdotally, as I talked to school districts through this process in March, the most common way schools were finding out what technology was needed at home was a one-to-one conversation teachers were having with with the parents. So which makes sense. We want the teachers to be as involved as possible, but we also know that teachers are not experts in understanding what technology needs are needed at home, and what schools are doing, have done with great success. We've changed an entire system in only a couple of weeks. So these are not critiques or criticisms of school districts and schools of how they're doing. Just a snapshot to be aware of in the future as we go forward. That that a lot of those decisions the teacher is making on their own. And if the teacher came back after a 5-minute, 10-minute phone call with a family, the teacher would determine, well, this family doesn't have enough technology, so we're going to give them paper handouts. And this family does have enough technology, from my understanding, from 5 minutes, so let's give them a laptop. So we're, exacerbating the digital divide by having people who are not trained in understanding the technology needs of parents making these decisions. So this is a I won't say a red flag, but an orange flag in terms of equity and how we make those decisions of who gets the technology and who gets the paper copy of instruction. Here's where we see the digital divide most prominent. When 62% of white parents felt that the school district was supporting the teacher with trainings and materials, and only 35% of parents of color believed the same thing. 73% of white parents believed that they were able to support their child with the curriculum, and only 36% of parents of color. And parents of color um, mean anyone who is not white. So sometimes Asian parents are excluded from parents of color. We did not exclude Asian parents from parents of color. We This slide does not show socioeconomic status, but we do have that data. We didn't feel that we had enough conclusive data to put a slide out, but we did see variance, of course, there to very early stages. But if it goes the way it's going, we'll see great divergence with student parents who are in the free and reduced lunch program as well. Again, more confidence with parents of color in terms of the technology at home, but still a great difference between 35 or 42% of parents of color having the technology they need, and 65% of white parents. In terms of overall support of the technology, we also found that as parents believed that they did have the ability to support technology, they didn't have all of the tools they needed to support the technology. That early slide was showing the peripherals. Printers, for instance, with students with parents of color were very low. So as schools are asking parents to print things out, it becomes very difficult without the same level of technology. And this might also be something that schools could think about in terms of a one-to-one program. Can those programs not only include Chromebooks, but can they include printers or other devices that could support work at home? Um, Most parents believed that their child was not getting the same amount of rigor at home that they were at school. That was true both of parents of color and white parents. It was more pronounced with white parents than parents of color, but there was still a very strong belief that they weren't getting the same amount of rigor at home that they are at school. We had parents actually write responses. We didn't require it, but many uh, expressed that they were behind, that they were still a week or 2 weeks behind of the content that the school had given them because they have more than one child. They're working sometimes with two different school systems or two different schools, and they're working from home themselves. So the attention that a third grader needs in terms of content is vastly different than an 11th grader. It's a different kind of focus for a parent to have. So those things need to be conscious of schools and teachers as they deliver instruction. So it's important to focus on your kids as a teacher. So if I'm a third grade teacher, it's great to have conversations with the parent about third grade instruction. But it might also be good to find out if there are other kids in the house, seventh or eighth grade kids who the parent also has to work with, and maybe find ways for older uh, children to help younger children with their parent. Let's see here. And here that is flipped again. We see, for instance, that supporting my child, the first one, my child is getting more out of this experience than they did at school. Not so much. Parents did not agree with that statement. However, this slide showing parents of color, more parents of color were open to the idea that their child might be learning more at home than at school, which is an interesting development. We did see that parents, or that the parents were telling us that, especially students of color, that they were taking at least the time that they spent more seriously because there weren't the number of distractions. While kids really miss their friends at school, there's very little bullying in online environments, and smart kids are not afraid to answer questions in online environments as they were at home. This is sort of, again, anecdotal responses from parents. And we're not surveying students, so we don't know where that lies with them, but we will keep asking more pointedly parents what's the level of engagement that might be different for their child than they had in schools. So now what? What do we glean from this? We have been following education periodicals and articles in the United States about what's happening in China post Corona, or as they sort of reignite their economy and education system, and what can we learn from what's happening there. Of course, those systems are very different. China is a very different uh, beast than the United States. But there's some interesting facts from a couple of different periodicals and articles that we read that we thought were interesting. In terms of the public, the internet service became much more spotty as parents use technology from home and not from work. So big files, long videos become more challenging. The need, again, for multiple devices at home was critical. This again is in China, so we don't know how this reflects in the United States, but the teachers found the process of experimenting on their own to be highly unproductive, which is a little surprising. So we want to see how that looks for American teachers as they too try to find things on their own and find things that relate to their content, and just finding things online. How are they finding things online, and are they finding that actually contributes to the rigor that they want to continue with? In terms of the state or the government, much like here, in China, a lot of the authorities are not requiring certain kinds of classes. They are throwing out standardized test results for this year, which is, we seem to be following that trend here in the United States. The state, or as in the school district, or the state of California, or the province in China, are actually doing live 24-hour broadcasts of content throughout the day on television, which we are not doing here in the United States, and I've really heard nothing at the state level that even comes close to that. But that's an interesting idea of broadcasting not only through the teacher but through other institutions, through the school district. Many school districts have television stations and are not doing that. NASA has a very good hour by hour live broadcast for educators, and scheduled work with mission control and astronauts and different things throughout the day. So finding content that is broadcast on a regular basis could be something that we could try here in the United States. 5 lessons from China. which we can apply here, is one, to recognize that the most important thing is about saving lives. This is a crisis that is unprecedented, as we all know. And as we try to figure out what happens with schools, uh, we have to remember health first. And that is a guiding principle that is happening in China, and they're making great strides in that. Know your student information system and the capabilities it has. A lot of school districts have turned their online curriculum that they had within the school to an online environment that's sort of in the cloud and more global, not necessarily changing some of the functionality that those computers, student information systems have. So what information can we get out of the student information? As in, how many children are in that home? What grades are they in? How can we mitigate and change delivery of content based on knowing that knowledge? An increase in bandwidth, this is sort of a societal issue. How are we going to push all of this content to families who have a very narrow uh, bandwidth in many cases? Are hotspots available um, for families who don't have good internet service? One of the things in terms of that chart we saw around peripherals, which we again need more information on, was that we found that white parents had spent more money on boosting their internet um, capabilities over the last 5 years than parents of color. Uh, Again, not sure if the question was worded enough, or we might have to ask more questions around that, because a lot of folks don't know if they've done that or not. So we got a lot of, I don't even know what that means, responses in there. So we'll keep looking at that. But bandwidth is definitely an issue. And communications, even in China, the amount of communications surveys constantly asking parents what is working was a very important in making sure that the content fit the moment, and having a plan for students and families who struggle with economically with having the right peripherals available to them or understanding the content. What are we doing about English learners in terms of getting content to them as we ask those parents to help their children at home do homework? What supports are we having for those parents? That's an important thing to think about as well. And that's the quick survey that we have. If you have any questions of any slides, I'd be happy to go back, or if you have sort of more general questions or questions about our methodology, I'd be happy to answer them for you. Awesome. Well, thank you again for participating in this. Maybe in 2 months when we do another one, you can come back and see where we are. We plan on having this again every other month. We'll take a snapshot of what's going on and present it out through our website, through social media, and through news agencies. So thank you so much for your time and for your listening. If you have any questions, again, my name is Jim Hollis with Calculus Roundtable. Please visit our website or give me a call, and I'd be happy to walk you through any particular details. Thanks a lot. Thanks for participating, and good luck and be safe.